Hello everybody, and we are live. Gary Crosby will be joining us shortly. We'll be back after we've heard from Ray Brown and Duke Ellington. Not Quite a
Well,
Caravan there, played by Duke
when,
Ellington
when
and Ray
you
Brown in 1972. Now, Gary Crosby is with us, but still sorting out one or two things. So I thought we'd move on to something else now that I had queued up. He was involved in a performance, or perhaps more than one, of Duke Ellington's Queen's Suite. So why don't we hear from the Queen's Suite, the 1959 recording by Duke Ellington, Northern Lights. From the Queen's Suite, Northern Lights there. My name's Anthony Pepper. Welcome to Uptown Lockdown. George Duncan is here, Frank Griffith is here, and our very special guest, Gary Crosby, is here. Frank.
and George Duncan.
Hi.
Remember George, all the way from near Glasgow.
I'm sure I mentioned that.
Near Edinburgh.
Sorry, George. Sorry, George.
Well, Scotland.
Anyway, thank you for tuning in today to Uptown Lockdown, and very pleased to have Gary Crosby with us today. Gary and I have had the pleasure of working together a few times.
Mhm.
I think we recorded an album together with Alexander Stewart many, many years ago.
Yeah.
And we also, I'm happy to say, have done a number of Ellington-related gigs.
Yes.
Strayhorn, of course, as well. Most recent was actually 5-6 years ago at the Cadogan Hall in London. and that was celebrating the centenary of Billy Strayhorn's birth. And Gary, Rod Young's wonderful drummer, wonderful pianist called Peter Edwards, and a wonderful sort of 9-piece band, including 10-piece band, actually. Omar Puente, all the way from Leeds, and run and set up and organized by Alex Webb. So we have great memories of that. But Gary, of course, was a founder member, I believe, of the Jazz Warriors in the mid 1980s.
Yeah.
And he also, he's essentially kept it going. Today they're known as Tomorrow's Warriors. I'm not sure when that name became official, but probably.
Well, it's two separate companies, Frank.
Sorry about that.
Yeah,
I apologize.
I left the Jazz Warriors in '89.
Okay, I apologize because I just used the word Warriors.
Yeah,
It's the Warriors Continuum, isn't it? So,
And,
so the new project was really to involve young people, wasn't it?
I did see it as a step forward. I don't know if everybody else in the original band agrees with how I did it or why I did it, but it was necessary.
Well, there's testimonial to that in the number of tours and work they've done throughout the UK, and most specifically the performance of several Ellington works. And more appropriately, the last piece we heard just now, the Northern Lights segment of the Queen's Suite. And maybe, Gary, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about that or your association with that piece.
Yeah, that piece, or the Queen's Suite, was the beginning of a big band called the New Civilization Orchestra, which at the time when we played it, those warriors would have been fourth year students at Trinity.
Sure.
It went out once as the Tomorrow's Warriors big band, but from then on, it was called the New Civilization.
I remember seeing that, I think, yes.
Yeah. It was that piece that made the band grow up, basically.
Good.
When you encounter Ellington, it can be quite a humbling experience, actually.
Yeah.
You realize you don't really know anything about jazz.
That's a nice feeling.
Really, it's a good way to
to
humble yourself and realize that there's still a lot to learn. And that was a piece where it's, I'd been listening to Ellington before, but that was the first time where I played one of his suites and was given the bass parts to learn. And then you go away and you listen to it, and you hear somebody like Joe Benjamin, full tone, 4 beats to the bar, and it's a proper 4 beats to the bar, and it's just the chord tones, all of that silly stuff that I'd learned from playing more slightly outside music meant nothing in that music.
Okay.
I learned a lot, and I'm still learning.
Yeah.
And then I had the great pleasure of explaining to Coleridge Good.
Wow.
That I was doing this Ellington project, and I was there practicing on one of his basses at the time.
Oh, amazing.
With Peter End in the room and Dave Green, pressure on top of pressure.
Hello.
And then Coleridge looks at me and says, Gary, Ray Brown was sitting in that exact position with that bass playing to my daughter. I wanted to jump out the window when he said that, because,
wow.
Peter End, Dave Green, and Coleridge, and then he's going to bring Ray Brown in the room as well.
That's quite a group of bass players.
Yeah, they call themselves the Lords of the Lower Frequencies.
Ah, perfect.
Now, everybody's got white hair except in me. I was like being in the room with Jesus's, really.
Well, Peter's had white hair for most of his life.
Yes.
And I'm happy to say that Peter's still with us. He was born in 1928 and residing in the South Coast near Brighton. Littlehampton, maybe somewhere like that.
I've
he
been twice, but I can't remember the exact place. It's not Littlehampton, but I have been down twice.
Okay, cool. That's good to hear.
Incredible.
Peter's one of our great people of jazz. Spent all that time in New York and San Francisco, and was very much a strong influence. Of course, Gary will remember with his club in the Hoxton area of London called the bass clef, the tenor clef, the alto clef. He had the whole stave covered. But really, now that we've mentioned Peter, Gary, I remember you telling me that you had maybe studied with him at some stage.
Yes. I spent. Oh, wait, even to this day, I can phone Peter and ask him questions, and I do.
Sure.
But I think it was Willie Garnett. I bought a bass from Willie Garnett about 50 odd years ago. And as I was going through the door, he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'm just going to have some fun." And he gave me Peter Ian's number, and it changed my life from then.
George, are you having an earthquake in Scotland?
I'm just moving the.
It looks like your house is amidst a minor earthquake there.
Okay.
I think we'll leave Ellington to all the earthquakes today, if that's okay. Or possibly Junior Raglan or Jimmy Blanton. Speaking of bass, can I just mention that in 1 month's time, on the 31st of this month, we're going to have Matthias Helium. Do you know his second name, Anthony?
Heyman, I think.
Heyman, like I said, who's like Gary and the rest of us, quite a big fan of Jimmy Blanton.
Yes.
And knows pretty much everything about Jimmy Blanton. So the more Jimmy Blanton, the better, is what I say. But Gary,
I wouldn't claim to be. I know everything about Blanton.
No, I'm not suggesting.
I know the big solos and the obvious stuff.
Yeah. Pitter Panther and those lovely pieces.
Yep. Pitter Panther.
Was there a connection between those duets and what Duke recorded with Ray Brown 30 years later on the Pablo record? The album is called "This One's for Blanton." Is that right?
Yep. One of my favorites.
Okay.
And I would believe I possibly heard that before I really listened to Blanton.
Okay.
I was hearing that album as in my 20s, and I think it may have been Peter End that actually hipped me up to that.
Yeah, sure.
And then I went back to study, listen to Blanton again, and I heard Body and Soul, and I just thought, nah, it's going to take another 30 years before I get there. That sort of technique. But I do. This one for Blanton is one of my Desert Island discs.
Okay.
Especially Suite for Fragmented, but can't remember the title. It's such a complicated title.
So Fragmented Suite for bass and
it sounds like it.
For piano and bass, I think something.
Yeah,
like
it sounds like it was not improvised, but it was put together quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. Sure.
It's got such a great vibe on it.
Yeah.
Is it in F? Yeah. Yes.
Frank would know. I wouldn't know.
I think it is in F.
Yep. Actually got it.
It sounds. Yeah.
So,
album for me.
So now Anthony will know the answer to this question. Blanton was probably just a few years older than Ray Brown, who presumably was playing with Dizzy and those bop lads in the early 40s when Jimmy was alive. Although I don't suppose that
cross paths.
Ray played with the big band, but he certainly played with Duke a lot with those small group albums, didn't he? Or certain. He played with Ella Fitzgerald, of course, who was his wife for a short period, but I believe he played on the first Verve album of Ella Sings Duke, which was not Duke Ellington on piano, but Oscar Peterson, I think. And Barney Kessel stands out on that album, doesn't he?
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and Ray, of course.
Yeah, I would have thought Ray would, because he was also a manager at the time.
Yes, that's right.
Possibly the arranger on Road as well.
And their adopted son.
I would be honest, I don't really know that album good enough to make judgments on it, but anything that has Ray Brown on it is going to be a good album, right?
Well, I was just sort of taken by the fact that Ella recorded a number of composer albums, and she recorded 3 for Verve with Duke Ellington's music,
right?
And the first of which was done with a small group, the sextet, whereas all the other albums she did for Norman Granz of the composers series were always big bands and strings. Right. And I just thought it was a novel idea to have her in a smaller band setting. And then, of course, she did these great albums in the 60s, which was, lots of Billy Strayhorn songs as well, wasn't it? And we did some of those, if you remember, on that concert that we had, 3 singers on the gig, as you remember. We did A-Train, which is one of the most fantastic Billy Strayhorn arrangements of A-Train. If you remember that bass riff that was going against the drums.
Maybe not.
Okay, well, no, I'm just saying.
The funny thing about it is, Frank, I can't remember that gig. So
okay.
I played very badly, and I've shut it out of my mind.
Well,
was
you
it David McCalmont on voice? Yes.
David was doing his thing.
The French lady on voice.
And Ronke Nkaki. Sandra Nkaki from Paris, but originally born in Cameroon. And a wonderful American singer who came over called Alan Harris, who sang. Anyway, I'm mentioning it because
Frank has an eidetic memory for his gigs, and
there's probably about 30 arrangements of A-Train in Ellington's pad. One was done for Paul Gonsalves, if you remember.
Yep.
And there's some ballad versions of it, and there's what I think was the most exciting one was Billy Strayhorn's arrangement for the Ella with Duke album, and that was 1956, and that's the one we played, and we featured the wonderful Omar Puente on it, if you remember.
All right. Yeah,
who played a violin solo, because, as you know, Ellington always had Ray Nance, didn't he, to break the old fiddle out,
Yeah, very often.
And Omar took to it like a duck to water. Oh. So, do you want to play another track, Anthony? And maybe Gary will have something to say about it.
So we started with a little piece of the Fragmented Suite.
Well done.
For piano and bass. And then we had the section of the Queen's Suite. Life? Yes, the sections of the Queen's Suite. And so you were just mentioning, Gary, Body and Soul with Jimmy Blanton. So I was thinking, let's hear that. Why don't we play that? This is one of the 1940, I think, duets that Jimmy Blanton and Duke Ellington recorded. The second series of duets that they made. And I'll see if I can chop it off before Mr. JB Blues. But here is Body and Soul. Body and Soul, by played by Jimmy Blanton and Duke Ellington in 1940. And Gary, you were just saying that you have the transcription of that.
Yeah, I think I do.
Somewhere
it's like a book. But then again, I did Mr. Green.
Oh yes.
I did a concert with Mr. Green, a three bass concert,
Oh, good grief.
and he played Blanton solo.
He's a devotee, isn't he? He's a very keen,
Oh yeah.
He came and talked to the society about that some considerable time ago now.
He knows Blanton.
Yeah. And so those records are so precious to me, and I'm particularly aware of the studio records. But in 1941, there's quite a lot of interesting live there are several live performances capturing Blanton on the stand, not just in the studio. And we'll be covering more of that with Matthias in about 4 weeks time, Frank? Yes, at the end of the month.
The 31st, yeah.
Yeah, so at the end, right at the end of the month there. So yes, look forward to that.
The crazy thing about it, when I first saw the transcription, the amount of 16th notes and what do they call these rhythms where you superimpose, polyrhythmic types, 5s against 6, and it's an amazing piece. It scared me just looking at it. I haven't done it as yet. It's there. It's one to do.
I can imagine that Jimmy might have blanched at having to play a transcription of his own solo.
Oh well, yes. I mean, it's always a bit. Yeah.
What you can play naturally looks much more difficult, I think, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
But Gary, I'm quite interested to know from your standpoint, having studied the music but also performed it and been around it for a good while. Blanton was considered, or is considered, one of the strong innovative forces of moving the bass along as a solo instrument.
Yep.
And how do you think his affiliation with Duke Ellington, because he did play with some other bands before that, believe it or not, when he was growing up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, wasn't it? He is a Southern.
If you have anything you could send me, that'd be great. But I have no recordings of him outside the Ellington stuff.
But the point is, he played with Duke for what, the better part of 2 years? Was that correct, Anthony? Mr.
Yes,
Information?
So that's right, roughly speaking, before his illness and indisposition got too much, and obviously he left, but it wasn't necessarily forever when he left, but it ended up being. As I say, we'll hear much more of that from the chap who has a doctorate in Jimmy Blanton coming up.
But I
at the end of the
wanted to
week.
get Gary's view on what were the kind of things that brought that innovation out in his playing, his soloing, for example, while he was with Duke Ellington. What are the things that you would think?
I would think Ellington's knowledge of harmony must have helped being
Sure.
around somebody like that. There are other bass players around at the time, Walter Page, Israel Crosby's,
Yeah,
but it was Blanton that developed that almost double time approach,
sure.
using, scales on top of on top of chords that he's been given. Very few bass players. There are a couple others I know that were soloing, but it's just the technical expertise he was displaying was very unusual on bass at the time as well. It's almost near to guitar type facility.
Yeah, very melodic, but very clear lines.
Yeah. It's funny, when I first heard it, especially it's been done on bow, which is, bowing jazz is a very difficult thing. It's hard on your tuning, it's hard on your technical thing. And to be doing it in 1940, 39, possibly on gut strings, and to create that sound, how old was he? 20 or something?
Yes, around then.
Yeah. He's relatively
So he was. When was he born?
About 1920.
About 1918, maybe.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he'd be close to Ray's age,
20,
wouldn't
20,
he?
21, maybe. 22, yeah, something like that. And Ray Brown was born in the
22, I thought it was.
Ray Brown was born. When was Ray Brown born?
Younger than Dizzy,
look it
yeah.
up. Mid 20s.
Yeah. But just to finish up on that period, Jimmy, in a way, kind of almost handed the baton, so to speak, in terms of bass soloing to none other than Charles Mingus, who was with Ellington for not very long, maybe a year or so. But that was much later.
Yeah, that was in the 50s, I thought.
I think it was late 40s, maybe. Anthony?
Also,
please?
we should mention, I do believe that Blanton played violin. For some reason,
Yes,
is
that's
that right,
right.
Anthony?
That's right.
So that would have been.
It was probably his start, I think, possibly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know that there's a lot of colorful stories about Mingus's behavior with Ellington, and I know that he and Juan Teasel weren't the best of friends, and they had some altercations. But Ellington told Mingus that he had to leave the band because Juan Teasel was an old problem, and they fully accepted Juan for what he was, as a rather excitable human being. But I gather that Mingus, went on to great things after he left Ellington, didn't he? He made all those great records.
I gather so, yeah.
No, I mean before he became a band leader himself, obviously.
And he kept his love for Ellington.
Yeah.
Right up until the end. Right.
Did you have opportunity to hear Charles play in the UK?
No.
Really?
I heard the George Adams what do you call it band? Not the tribute band. Yeah, I heard the tribute band.
I think it was called Mingus Dynasty.
Yeah, I've heard those bands.
But that was after Charles passed away. Yeah.
But I never got to hear this.
I heard him one time when I was about 16. He came to my local hometown, and he was just as growly and gruff and everything. And he unfortunately developed this thing called Lou Gehrig's disease, where your muscles deteriorate. And so he stopped playing a couple of years before he passed away. But I just think he had a very strong, and for people that like Ellington. Charles made 2 albums, Changes 1 and Changes 2,
Yes.
on Atlantic, and a song that's played a reasonable amount today is called Duke Ellington's Sound of Love.
Yeah.
And I recommend it very highly. It's very, very rich tribute, without trying to be a tribute, if you know what I mean, to the music of Billy and Duke. So let's hear it for Charles
I think on
Mingus.
volume 1, did they play
Yeah,
A Train on one track?
Well, that could be the
Is it
live at.
Roland Kirk?
He did an album called Mingus Live at Carnegie Hall with George Adams as well, and wrote the great Roland Kirk, who a lot of British people will remember. Ronnie Scott's. Did you ever hear him, George or Anthony, at Ronnie Scott's?
No, I never.
Who? Sorry.
He used to play at Ronnie Scott's, Roland Kirk, didn't he? He's famous.
Roland Kirk? No, I never saw Roland Kirk, no.
Oh, yeah, he was a regular visitor, you know.
So I have those dates, by the way. 1918 for Blanton's birth, 22 for Mingus, and 26 for Ray Brown. At least according to, I think, Wikipedia there. So, yeah.
Right. Well,
so look, you just mentioned, obviously Charles Mingus and recordings that he made. I had, as people might just have got a slight whiff of there on the sound, queued up something from the Money Jungle album.
Oh, wonderful! Wonderful.
It's randomish. Shall we hear Warm Valley?
Please.
if it's
Warm
whatever
Valley
you-
there by. Sorry, Gary. Warm Valley there by Duke Ellington, played by Duke Ellington, Charlie Mingus, and Max Roach in. Oh gosh, 61 was it?
61.
Yeah, let's go with that. That was an album, by the way, which has been chosen for reissue by. Let me get this right, by the Blue Note Tone Poet series, where they're putting out LPs, all analog. And I think
Wow.
that's right. I think that was on UA originally.
Right.
I hope some of that's right.
Was on UA, yeah.
Yes, and so so that's one of the Blue Note family, as it were.
Right.
Well, it's also a universe. I'm not quite sure exactly how that works out, but they've been bringing out LPs over the last couple of years, all analog. That's their selling point, you know. And that's one of the ones that they issued last year. I don't have that issue. Of course, the original issue is also all analog as well.
Right.
In fact, all issues of it up to the late 70s would be all analog. But after that, you can't be sure.
Well,
anyway,
before we
Money Jungle, from the album Money Jungle. What a great album.
Yeah.
well, before we go into the next thing, Gary, I'd like to hear
My view,
about your views on how
On
that
my-
trio played together.
when I heard about the album, I couldn't. I had to get it. It's one of my favorites, but there are things on it which I think Mingus's bass might be overdubbed in a couple places.
Oh,
Oh wow!
There's a certain sound I'm hearing. Every time I hear it, I just think it sounds to me like he's put that on afterwards. But
yeah,
if
that would
you
be interesting to
listen
hear
how
more
he's
of it.
playing- If you listen to how he's playing on Caravan, it's almost like it's a new way of playing bass because he's actually not playing much bass. How he plays Caravan,
Right.
he's almost playing like a guitar figure. I wish I could play the piano, but if you listen to it, he plays. There's not much bass notes, but he's playing his figure on top.
Well, he had form, didn't he, with the Massey Hall
It's
issue.
an amazing approach because it's not something you could transcribe or would want to. Well, you might do if you're that, but it's just effect it had.
Right.
It sounded almost avant-garde
Yeah,
the way he was approaching it, because he was playing with the time, playing with the tone. Yeah, it's well worth checking out. Was it Caravan? Yeah. No, just the way he starts Caravan.
It could have been.
well,
it's-
Mingus was, yeah,
that term Ellington uses imaginary Latin, which
Yes.
he used on the. It's almost like when I heard that, I went back to that album. Then I saw exactly what he was talking about. It's imaginary Latin.
Well, Mingus was quite well known for his distinctive sound, and presumably, with the setup he had on the bass, that was so strongly his. You could tell him in a second, one note, and his soloing ability was so strong. And I go back again to the pre-Mingus workshop, which pretty much started in the mid '50s and kept on going until his passing. But he recorded albums with very well-known guitarist called Tal Farlow, as well as the great who is the other guy? Red Norvo. Sorry.
Was it Lionel Hampton? I think it was Lionel.
Oh, he did play in Lionel's big band. He wrote a piece called Mingus Fingers. Have you tried that one?
I think Tal was part of that.
Could have been.
They had a quartet, didn't they?
Yeah, well, they had it. I've got the CD of the trio, but same different, similar thing. And his soloing then was really advanced, and he was still quite a young man at that point.
Sorry.
So I'm available, Gary, if it's Saturday night.
If there are gigs being booked here, that's.
But what a wonderful sound he had, and because of that, it might have worked for him to play that style that you were describing, because of his melodic sense and how that adapted to playing chords, presumably 2 or 3 or 4 note chords on the bass.
Yeah, there were quite a few full double stops, but also Mingus does have a classical aesthetic to him as well.
Okay,
he did play cello. He has a classical aesthetic. He's aware of Bartok. He's aware of So it was things like that I heard when he on that caravan. It was just like, wow.
Shall we hear it?
Yes, please.
Why not?
I've grabbed it here. I think. Let's hope this is the right track, because on the Ray Brown album they don't quite get into Caravan. They kind of skirt around it melodically. But here is the version or the performance from Money Jungle.
It's more like Conestoga.
Okay.
Normal key, C7.
Normal key. There we are. Frank, if you can't see him, but he's. Oh, there he is.
Get your
Hello,
bass.
Frank.
Get your bass.
Oh, well, man.
That was Caravan by Duke Ellington,
It was. Well, Wanty's
Max Roach, and the great Charles Mingus.
And they were playing.
And we're going to reinvent it now live with Gary on bass.
Oh.
Is that?
I'm going
Is
to
it?
turn Gary up a bit.
I haven't played this bass for about a year and a half, so
No.
it worked. Yeah,
It still works, does it?
Is that
Go ahead,
right?
Gary. I'll join you.
What note's the first note? The first melody note?
C.
You know.
That's in tune. That's in tune.
It is.
That's in tune. That's a G, isn't it?
Yep. All right, are you ready, Frank?
Go ahead. You start. I'll join in.
All right.
This is Caravan.
All right, let's start slow.
I could tell what Gary was playing by watching his fingers.
Sorry,
That's right.
sorry.
Zoom was doing its best there.
Zoom. I'm afraid Zoom won on that duet.
Yeah. Well, there's a latency problem, isn't there?
There's a latency, but also in the air as well. It tries to cut out feedback,
Yes.
so it's always
The
difficult.
fact is, what we've proven is that we can still play together, and that Gary's bass is working just fine.
And Ellington's music is still relevant.
That's the most important thing.
You know, 2021 in a COVID
Environment.
you could, and the other great thing about that particular track, I've heard it played. Can I play it here? This reggae guy plays it like this. Somebody's shoot the pen. So anyway, there's this kind of Caribbean version, like the Smithsonian does. Ellington's music is so adaptable.
It is. That's a good example of it.
If you're watching Comely Strict Dancing, something's going to come up, you know, either Satin Doll or something like that. And then with us, you know, we take Caravan and Keith and tracks like that, and we turn it into almost avant-garde type things. You know, it's that.
Yeah. Well, this seems like a good time to mention another group you've been associated with and leading for many years now, and of course that's Jazz Jamaica.
Yes,
can you talk a little bit about that band and how you guys tackle different styles of music and that sort of thing?
Well, the original band, basically, we just played. You know what I mean? We just got. It was some older Jamaicans, and we basically just played. But Ellington had a big influence, not influence, but I think we did Caravan, and we
of course
did
It don't mean a thing.
We did that. We did about 3 or 4 Ellington tracks.
Sure.
You know, my like Monty Alexander and Ernest Ranglin, these are people that I grew up. So I heard, Ellington's name all the time. Ellington is in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, amongst those that are into jazz. That's like a god. You don't put him in a league. You don't have, well, I prefer Charlie Parker, then so and so and so. No,
Yeah.
Ellington is on his own.
He's there. He's a planet. He's his own planet. Yeah.
Yeah. That is, we don't even involve him in those kind of discussions. It's just accepted that he's one of the greats.
Well, speaking of planets, another great jazz man who was literally from Saturn was called Sun Ra. And I don't know if gentlemen here have heard Sun Ra's band when he was alive.
No, not when he was alive.
But you'll be happy to know the band's still going today, led by
Good,
Marshall
yeah.
Allen.
I dispute your he's literally from Saturn.
Well, that's what he said.
Yeah. Well,
But I heard Sun Ra's band a few times, and he was still holding forth.
yeah.
And he played A Train. He played a lot of Ellington music,
Right.
And I think that's a really good example of how flexible. Well, I think the word you used was adaptable.
Yeah, functional. Yeah.
Functional, exactly. And another band, not to get too carried away, but a band that Britain's own Tony Kofi, who also, by the way, he was on that gig at Cadogan Hall. You might remember.
That's right.
There.
That's right.
And played one of the most beautiful renditions of Blood Count ever played by a saxophone, if you remember. But anyway, Tony played with the World Saxophone Quartet, which is sadly no longer. The band is disbanded. But Tony, I heard the World Saxophone Quartet, and they played a lot of Ellington too.
Right.
Playing in a context of just four saxes and no rhythm section or brass or anything else.
I mean, it's kind of accepted that Ellington is as important as, for a young musician coming into this music. You got to learn to play the blues. You got to learn to play rhythm changes. You got to learn to play standards. And then sooner or later, your teacher's going to say, you have to learn some Ellington songs,
Yeah.
Whether it's for study, or work, practically every jam session or every function I do, somebody's going to ask for an Ellington song. Even if they don't, we're going to play one anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Whether it be Satin Doll or Caravan. Caravan is a very popular one. A Train is a very
yeah. So you've got to learn the A Train changes as well, haven't you? As well as
Well, what about getting back to what you're saying about the Jazz Jamaica? Because I know they're clearly a going concern today. And I believe you did a broadcast recently with them. Was that my understanding?
I haven't played in the band for 3 years because I had a brain hemorrhage.
Okay.
3 years ago. So I haven't actually played with it, with the band for about.
I do remember. I do remember them playing on something recently on Radio 3. That's all, but that's beside the point. Can you tell us how you're doing generally with playing and getting around and leading a normal life?
I actually finished Ray Brown's solo for unaccompanied bass a few weeks ago, which for me is a great challenge. Even if I didn't have this disability, it's a great challenge. So I'm doing all right, I think.
Good.
That's great.
I reckon in a year or two, maybe.
Well,
you never know with these kind of neurological problems.
Sure.
I remember speaking to Gerard Presence, and he said, wonderful phone call he gave me one day, and he just because he had a similar type stroke.
Okay.
He said it would at least give it at least 3 years, Gary.
Sure.
And he's close. He's close.
Gary's Gary, obviously. Gerard, for those of you that might not be familiar with his name, he's a wonderful trumpet player and flugelhorn player, as well as a composer. And he was also teaching at the academy for many years.
Yes, that's right.
But more importantly,
in Germany too.
he's moved to is that right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
He's one of, when he was growing up, I known him from he was 13.
Sure.
He was even as a 13-year-old, he's badass.
Yeah. And just a beautiful melodic player. And he's done every style of music.
Very special. Very, very special music.
Every style of music imaginable, and written in it and everything. But as far as what I heard on the bass today, even through the wonders of Zoom, I heard a full sound and a good strong beat. I suppose once you establish your sound on the bass, as long as you keep your chops going, it's going to be you, and it's going to be strong,
Yeah. An example. One day I was at Ronnie Scott's, and we were having a jam session with Dave Holland, Marvin Smith, and Steve Coleman.
Hello.
I was getting roasted by Smitty, and they were playing those kind of tunes like Softly in the Morning Sunrise, they kind of tunes that you can turn into modal things, and you don't know where the B section is. And I got roasted, which so it's a good roasting. And then Dave Holland came in and took my bass and sounded like Dave Holland.
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't have believed he was playing my little cheap plyboard bass at the time. He just sounded like Dave Holland.
Amazing, isn't it?
Unbelievable. So I believe most bass players, of course, the instrument does matter. Of course, practice does matter. But the sound is, you travel with the sound in your hands anyway.
That's a good way to call it.
That way, fair point.
Yes, whenever in any walk of life, really, when you're using an instrument of some sort, the quality does matter, because it enables you to do more as your own ability and technique increases. You can explore more things, but you can still, once you are accomplished on something, you can still go back to something more basic, and achieve a lot of what you are able to do. Yeah.
George, just like to hear, you've hosted a lot of things to do with the Scottish National Jazz Orchestra.
Yes, I was.
And they have a wonderful, well, they did, I don't know if he's still in the band, who's based in London, called Callum Gourlay.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure Gary's familiar with Callum.
Yeah. I've never played with him, but I've heard him a few times.
I'm just mentioning him. It doesn't have to be him. Any number of young bass players, and some more seasoned ones as well, up in the presumably Edinburgh and Glasgow area.
Yes.
Do any particular names come up as far as really contributing something strong and unique to the Scottish jazz scene?
You've caught me on the hop here. I've just been enjoying listening to you.
But I live for catching you on the hook. Gary does it to me all the time.
On the hop-shaped hop there, the hop-shaped hook.
Hop.
On the hop.
But I've heard some lovely concerts by the Scottish National Jazz Orchestra.
Yes.
Is this Tommy Smith's band?
Yeah, Tommy's directs it. And
anything with Tommy is going to have the best musicians.
do you have memories, Gary, of Tommy as a young man, as a younger player?
Yes. In fact, I was speaking with Tommy about 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
I did a Zoom with him.
Sure.
I have a lot of respect for Tommy.
Yeah, he's done so much for jazz and Scotland.
And himself as well. He's done a lot for himself, and it's good for younger musicians to
recognize that. Yeah,
they've had struggles in life. Tommy's not. He wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth.
Really, right?
And it's good for some of the youngsters around me to ask me questions about it, and I can explain that. And me and Janine, we love him. Actually, we admire him so much.
Yeah, he's a strong force, isn't he?
Jazz does carry a degree of, I wouldn't say narcissism, but it does carry a degree of the individual having to work on himself in the practice room on his own, night after night. And it can lead to sort of delusions of grandeur amongst some of them.
Oh gosh, yes.
What we love about Tommy is, regardless of how far he's gone, he's willing to give back.
Yeah, he's very generous.
That's the key, I think, for us anyway. Those are the sort of people we like to be around.
So I was just thinking, we talked about younger people there, and particularly you're associated with this project over the last, I guess, almost 30 years now.
It is 30 years this year.
Yes, right, of the Tomorrow's Warriors and associated.
The Tomorrow's Warriors.
Yeah.
And I was associated with the, I don't know how to put it, my friends are my, we were all young. We were young people. We're in your late teens, early 20s. You don't really know anything. You just want to upset everybody.
Oh dear.
That's what young people do.
That's their job, yeah.
It can happen.
We were never given, we were never, nobody understood that side. They just heard a lot of angst and a lot of anger and a lot of whatever. But don't they have kids? Don't we have younger siblings? Doesn't everybody go through this experience? Young people do that. They just create chaos.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with ethnic background or cultural background. It's just that's what young people want to do.
They're pushing the boundaries all the time.
So what I was aware of, though, in the 90s, from the 90s onwards, particularly, were the appearances, I guess, at the South Bank of various versions through the years, It was always fantastic to see the young people come and perform.
Yes.
I've always, just to mention, the project that Desert has with the Guildhall School and Martin and Michael Kilpatrick, who helps with that too, of course. It's wonderful to have, they're obviously young adults, but, when young people get a chance, particularly with Ellington, but really with any of this music, it's something that's just wonderful to see in them, that they can just pick up and go with it. And they've got that youthful zeal, of course, which always helps.
Energy, yes. So they will inject their energy into the music in a way that, once you start reaching late 40s and 50s, the whole practice schedule changes. You've got other things to do in life that take up your time. But when you're young and possibly living in halls or residence, and parents are paying for it as well. Just practice all day and bring that energy anytime.
The world's your oyster, yeah.
The world's your oyster, yeah.
I remember listening to that fairly known, famous interview with Paul Desmond interviewing Charlie Parker in the early 50s, not too long before Charles passed away in 1955. And he was asking Charlie Parker, he was asking Bird about those very things, And Charlie, he probably left high school when he was about, 15 or something. And he just practiced for something like 13 hours a day in Kansas City at his mom's house, and he probably just drove all the neighbors crazy and everything. But he was so focused on practicing, and that was really the groundation, if you like, for his own development as a player. But he was a big admirer of Jimmy Dorsey, who was not, considered a really innovative jazz musician. But what a brilliant saxophonist. And to hear that Charlie Parker, kind of his early hero on the saxophone, besides Lester Young, who used to go here in Kansas City, of course, because Lester was, 11 years older. Anyway, he was a big fan of Jimmy Dorsey. And so what you're saying is that when you're at that age, you're a sponge, aren't you? You're
taking it all in, and you'll be surprised what sort of things, some of the most hippest musicians listen to, in terms of, I know a lot of heavyweight jazz musicians who love Frank Sinatra.
Sure. Good example.
Heavyweight jazz musicians.
Well, our friend in Harrow, our pal, bassist Miles Danso,
yes,
who's also been involved with those Ellington projects that we were mentioning earlier. He got dragged along to a concert at Royal Festival Hall when he was 18. Did he tell you that story? Which was
No,
Frank,
you've never told me that.
Frank Sinatra when he was like 16, you
He
know?
was lucky.
And his parents took him and they said, listen, you want to go check out this guy, Frank Sinatra? And initially he said, oh, no, I can't be ours. No, I can't go hear Frank Sinatra, man. I'm, 17 and I want to be a jazzer, whatever. And he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it when he heard the concert. Can you imagine? I mean, he was just dumbfounded, agape at how great he was as a forget if it's a jazz singer, a pop singer. He was just a great performer, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah.
And interestingly enough, it's a little bit of a segue here, but he recorded an album with Sinatra, didn't he, Ellington? And it's called, Anthony will know, Francis.
Wow, I didn't know this.
Yeah, Francis Albert K. Edward K. and Francis A. or something like that. Their full names, wasn't it?
Right.
Francis Albert Sinatra, Edward Kennedy Ellington, whatever.
Francis A. and Edward K.
And
or maybe the other way. I think it was that way around.
the only minor gripe I have about that particular album, well, two minor gripes. Ellington didn't do the arrangements. They were done by Billy May, who I couldn't have thought of as a better stand-in for Ellington because he wrote the arrangements in Ellington style. But the other thing and most important issue is Frank only recorded one Ellington song, which I'm glad he did. He did all the rest were standards like Or Butterfly and Yellow Days. Great songs.
Right.
And he did I Like the Sunrise. Now, I don't know how familiar people are with that song. It's a lesser known Ellington song, isn't it? Anthony, can you tell us a little bit about I Like the Sunrise?
Well, it's the first movement of the Liberian Suite, which was
It is,
1947.
absolutely. Yeah. So.
And so the rest of them are just dances. That's what they're called, dances 1 to 5. I think it's 6 tracks, 6 pieces of music. And so, yes, it was recorded by the band, and Al Hibbler came in and sang it. Actually, after the band had recorded an early example of overdubbing, apparently. And then it was a piece that Frank Sinatra performed. And, I think it's a really good performance on that record. And it's an album that, as you've mentioned, because perhaps of the arrangements and other situations there, which caused its creation, it is a bit, there's a bit of a tension to it, I would say.
Yeah.
Would you say that? And Yellow Days is one, and Indian Summer. Is that a Johnny Hodges feature that doesn't even have?
No, Johnny's featured on Indian Summer, very much so, yes. But he's also, I believe, does a solo on Poor Butterfly.
Right, yes. Poor Butterfly is a lovely song.
Now, Gary, one thing we haven't discussed, but perhaps you might have memories of some of the great singers of Ellington that you're familiar with or had heard live. Some of his great vocalists, like Anthony just mentioned Al Hibbler. Sorry.
Yeah, I never got to meet Al Hibbler, but I think I did Joe. Joe.
Not Joe Williams, no.
I think, yeah. I think
he was with Daisy.
Joe Turner.
I think he's Joe Turner, yeah.
Right, yeah, blues singer, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yes, so we mentioned him last. Oh, no, sorry, so we didn't mention him. Sorry, getting conflated between the different programs here. The New York Duke Ellington Society had Ken Steiner on last week and mentioned Joe Turner, yes.
And I had once the opportunity to meet the singer back from 1920s when they did that.
Adelaide Hall.
Adelaide Hall.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had the opportunity to lift Coleridge's bass.
So Gary,
to the gig. I was on the gig as well. I was with Courtney Pine's band.
So sorry, say that again. You broke up a bit there, Gary.
Yeah, I had the opportunity of meeting Adelaide Hall and speaking with her.
Lovely. Wow.
Wonderful
woman too. Wonderful.
Yeah, I met Coleridge a couple of times, and it was a great pleasure. Of course, he came to at least a little bit of fame, I guess, through being on the Goon Show, didn't he?
Yes.
With yes. In Ray Ellington's band, No Kin.
Yes.
Yes. I believe that's the case. I think Ray Ellington took the name because of Duke.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that's right. I hope that's right. Anyway,
He was a good drummer, though.
yeah.
Ellington.
In the
I
yeah,
like
it's,
the
oh,
drummer.
the good. I mean, the Goon Show. I do like the Goon Show. I have to say.
Yeah.
And the musical interludes are fantastic. They usually had one jazz and one not so jazz piece in a program, didn't they?
I think Coleridge had like a not a speaking part, but he had like a little role.
Oh
They
really?
had a name for him. Yeah. On one of the albums, you can actually hear him singing in the background.
Oh right.
You know, I think they're pretending it like they're like an Egyptian type.
Oh.
And Coleridge said, well, that was the role he used to play in the Ellington band when
Yes.
they used to play at the Caribbean Club.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Well,
But
another contemporary, well, a bit younger, on the telly at that time was Cleo Lane.
Mhm.
And she did a lot of guest appearances on a show contemporaneous called That Was the Week That Was. And George, you probably might remember that show.
Yes, I do. Yes, and of course Cleo. I've worked with Cleo. I don't know many times.
Mhm.
And she sang the theme song on that show. She depped for an actress called Millicent Martin.
Listen,
I think that was her name.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was. Yes, that's fascinating. I haven't
And
crossed that.
Millicent, I think that's a kind of unusual name, Millicent or something.
Millicent.
Is it? Yeah. Anyway, she was a great singer. And I say that because not only was she a great singer, but that theme song was a very difficult, it's like singing an up-tempo Billy Strayhorn melody, you know. Do you remember, Gary, we did, sorry to be putting you on the spot like this.
No.
Do you remember we did that song that Alex wrote words to called Johnny Come Lately? Be-do, boo-dee-doo-do-dee-da. It's a very difficult melody.
I know the song, but I didn't remember.
Well, anyway, what I'm saying is those Strayhorn melodies are so difficult to sing.
Yeah.
I think some of them, you know. And I'm using an up-tempo version because we often associate Strayhorn, don't we, with the slower songs? You know, the ballads.
Medium tempo, yeah.
Those incredible,
Hmm.
uh,
Well, the orchestrations for those, yes.
lush is the word.
Yeah, almost. You can feel the impressionist influence.
Oh, very much. He was a very big fan. Was he of Debussy and Ravel, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Strayhorn.
yeah. I'm aware of the Ravel influence on all of them. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I've always had it in my mind.
Well, I mean, Billy Strayhorn spent a good part of his life in France, didn't he?
Right. I didn't.
Anthony, did you know that? You must know that. That he
he
had a very close friend
Yes, so obviously,
called Aaron Bridger,
when
who
he
was a pianist,
of
who was
course,
also American.
probably off mic. When he was young, he wrote that famous song, of course, about with that foretelling line, "A Week in Paris." So he did, I believe, go off to Paris at one point. Yes.
Well, no, he recorded albums in Paris. Come on, you must know this.
Oh, he did. Yes, but there was
Very strongly influenced by French culture was Billy Strayhorn.
Sure.
Mm.
Yes.
And Gary, I mentioned it because Gary pointed out his musical love of what they call the impressionistic French music of which was started almost by Debussy and then Ravel, who was slightly later than
Debussy.
younger. Yeah,
And is it Satie before?
Yes. Yeah.
Eric
definitely.
Satie,
They were both influenced by him.
very much so. Yeah.
Eric Satie.
And as you know, Ellington was influenced by some of that music, and he, of course, was told famously by the American composer William Grant Still, who is an African American composer who was maybe a little older than Ellington, and Ellington went to him for guidance, when he was quite young, maybe in the 20s, something like that. And he was telling William, this wonderful composer, about his desire to, emulate the great European composers. Yeah. Obviously there was so many incredibly innovative composers, like from Wagner all the way to, the later ones like well, later, Stravinsky and Ravel
Bartok and everyone.
and Bartok is a great example. Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, and William Grant Still, this is documented in Ed Green's Ellington Companion, which Anthony knows something about. And he said, you pursue your music, you do what you do, which is, the music of America. But of course Ellington did so much fusing of music from America. The stuff I really, is the stuff that to do with Louisiana and the South. The Creole influence.
Yes, the New Orleans suite is
perfect example.
What a beautiful piece of music.
That is a remarkable example, and of course he had a lot of New Orleans musicians in his band. Probably the most famous of whom might have been Barney Bigard. Okay, Barney Bigard. Yeah. He did the famous solo. Anthony, tell us what Barney Bigard did, please.
Well, he did so many things, didn't he? I mean, he was the clarinet in Mood Indigo, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
And he obviously, moving forward a bit, he performed a concerto for Barney, Clarinet Lament, and various other things after that.
Incredible.
Barney has this New Orleans classic woody clarinet tone.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. It's not like a sort of modern Jimmy Hamilton. It sounds entirely different,
Well, as long as when you say Woody, you're not referring to Woody Allen.
No, not Woody Allen's clarinet playing. No, but not Woody Herman's clarinet playing either.
No.
But yes, the Woody New Orleans. Well, you know what I mean. It's got that.
The sound of the wood.
Yeah.
Natural.
Do you know who Woody Allen's?
It probably just isn't the wood. It's probably the
favorite
clarinet.
Clarinet player was. And his idol was another New Orleans clarinet player called George Lewis. Has anyone heard of George Lewis?
We have, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was a very raw New Orleans type player with a real kind of what you could call slightly rustic type of sound, Anyway, Anthony, do you have another track?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking. I mean, we may be beginning to wind up here, but I was just thinking maybe we should play Second Line from New Orleans Suite.
Go ahead, take the call. I'll kill some time. G minor, isn't it, Gary?
Second line by Duke Ellington from 1970 from New Orleans Suite, featuring, we think, Russell Procope and Joe Benjamin bass. Gary, you were going to say something about that.
Yeah, I've listened to that track quite a lot. You know, I tried to transcribe. I have transcribed quite, and the bass player doesn't make one mistake. It's just perfect.
Yeah.
And the note choices are. It's just I think all young bass players, if they want to learn how to play in one key but still keep it interesting, we should learn that piece of music. You know, I think it's G minor 7.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
But he's literally playing, G minor. He's putting the flat fifth in there sometimes, like a bebop scale, to make sure he lands on the. Anyway, I shouldn't get too technical. It's just happy, great sound, incredible propulsion. I say,
it's like 10 minutes of happiness overflowing.
Do not cook while you're listening to this music, or don't run a bath while you're listening to this music.
Only cook in a microwave so it turns off automatically.
That would be the safest bet.
Well, that's what we need, is a hob that has, so you can set it on. I've always thought this. Set it for 10 minutes so your porridge doesn't burn, you know. But they don't. Well, I don't.
I mean, you have this wonderful feeling, as you were saying, Gary, about the kind of loping bounciness of the rhythm section, you know. And so the bass player won't be playing an overly complex line, you know. No. And I sort of heard it as something like this.
It is something like that.
Triadic almost.
Yeah. And the bass line was, I think it kind of. He's got that kind of thing. When it comes to the
perfect,
solo, he just goes. You know? He walks like. I don't know, like my granny used to walk back in Jamaica, man, walk 20 miles without stopping with washing on her head. It's so strong.
It's just so infectious. And the thing I really liked about it as well was presumably it was either Norris or Russell on the clarinet solo. Okay. Now, Jimmy Hamilton, as you might know, had left the band by then, but I thought it was much more appropriate for that sound that they got. It was kind of a slightly, heavily vibrato sound, you know. And Jimmy Hamilton wasn't a vibrato player. He was a more clean, sort of really skilled classical clarinetist, as you know. To play those Ellington lines that he played, they were very difficult lines. And this was a little bit more, kind of Saturday night fish fry. It
was the New Orleans Suite, wasn't it? So, return more to the New Orleans kind.
No, but I'm just talking about the kind of vocal quality of the clarinet, you know, because the clarinet's not associated with a vocal sound the way a saxophone is, or a trombone. One could argue that trombone is the most vocal of all the wind instruments, you know. And then a trumpet, of course, you know. Cootie Williams had the most angry, grouchy vocal sound on the trumpet, didn't he? You know, that tricky stuff? Oh!
And Tricky Norton on trombone. Yeah.
Tricky.
Yes,
tricky.
So, I mean, definitely, because of Joe Nanton, obviously, we do associate the trombone with the vocal qualities there. But yeah, certainly, I mean, even before Joe Nanton, I suppose there was a certain amount of that around. But yes.
Listen, we're kind of entering what they call the tyranny of the clock.
Tyranny of the clock.
Tyranny of the clock.
We need to produce some merchandise.
But some of us have to have our dinner. Some of us have to have our dinner. Now, can I just say, not to end on a bad note, but we cannot ignore the recent passing of one of Britain's greatest band leaders and a very fine trombonist and just a very, very strong influence on jazz in Britain. And that's, of course, the late Chris Barber, who died yesterday morning. at age 90. He wasn't performing for the last couple of years, having been hospitalized for dementia. But he sadly left us yesterday, and a number of us had heard Chris Barber over the years, and most importantly to this show, he played a lot of Ellington and had it specially arranged for his band. I heard the band about 5 years ago in the stables in Wavendon, and he filled the house. He filled the whole house, and they had 3 trumpets, 2 trombones, 4 saxes, a banjo. Yes, he had a banjoist, and a bass, of course, drums and piano. So what a great loss. And one of our friends and guests is Bob Hunt, who was on a few months ago. And hopefully we'll have Bob to talk about Chris, because Bob worked with him for a long time. But Ken, George, you mentioned hosting Chris up in the Scotland area.
Over the last 10, 15 years, every time the band played in Scotland, I would run the concert and introduce them. And just great guys, and he was always great fun. In fact, I remember the last time at the Glasgow Jazz Festival, somebody came up to me and said, now, when you introduce Chris, and he was about to tell me what to say, and Chris said, excuse me, George knows what to say. Because, of course, all I would say was, ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome a living legend, Chris Barber? And he'd come on, and, of course, he'd do his stuff. A lot of times, actually, sadly, towards the end, he would, because they played in Germany so much, he would actually speak to the audience in German. So eventually they got a what do you call it, an iPad or something, so he would know and would read it out. But he was great fun. Lovely man. Seriously a lovely man.
I remember him talking a lot to the audience at Wavendon. Mm-hmm. This was probably good 5 or 6 years ago. So, but he spoke so quickly, I couldn't understand a word he said.
I drove him from Aberdeen, I think it was, to Edinburgh, to the airport. And I was lucky if I got 1 word out of 6 that I understood that night. And it wasn't drink, it was just one of those things, you know.
So he liked to chat, is what you're saying.
He did, absolutely did. Lovely man.
And of course, one of a great historian of jazz as well.
He had a trumpet player in his band, who sadly died, of course, called Pat Halcox. And Pat was in the band, get this, for 54 years.
Ooh.
I mean, is that like, that's almost an Ellington length record?
Yeah, it's a live.
Because as you know, Harry Carney was with Ellington for about 55 years or something, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. Johnny Hodges, of course.
Probably more like 45, but yes.
Okay, well,
lifespans were shorter back then, you know.
Yeah. No, good point. But I just want to say that
in general,
I did meet the band. I know the trumpet player quite well, Mike Henry. You might know Mike.
Yes, I know Mike very well.
Mike is a good pal, and of course, I had a chance to meet Pat, who was with Chris pretty much up to the time he became ill. You know, and he predeceased Chris, but he was the most gentlemanly, warm person you could ever meet. And can you imagine holding down the first trumpet chair with that band for that length of time? And I think he went through his share of rhythm section players, as you do, don't you, Gary? Because you're a soldier in the rhythm section sometimes, and it can be kind of wearing on your fingers to be playing.
Well, not only that, I mean, rhythm section players tend to, seeing they're in the back, maybe the band leader doesn't, you know.
Sure.
Sometimes the front player beside you has a little spot in the set.
Sure.
It helps the set, you know, give it some shape and some form, or, you know, you're used to that person's soloing on that tune. Dad once said to me, "Ain't nobody listening to the bass players anyway. We're not supposed to hear you. We're supposed to feel you."
Yeah.
I don't want, I was telling him about all my melodic minor scales and all that. It's just shut up. Nobody wants to hear you. They want to feel you.
Well, it does depend on the context, doesn't it? But I mean,
well, yeah, but yeah, to the older, like
the whole name rhythms.
Yeah, the old Caribbean musicians who our thing is music is socially functional.
Mm.
It's not an art form as such.
Sure. Good distinction.
How dare you, as a bass player, talk about you want a bass solo? What are you talking about? How are people going to dance?
But that is the rhythm section role, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
Quite literally.
That's your job.
But
That's
obviously,
your job.
The various instruments of the so-called rhythm section, including the piano, of course,
I don't know if
can break out and be featured, and that's happened a lot more and more.
I don't know if any of you guys remember the late great Eddie Harvey, who is a very good friend of mine, and we worked a lot together in teaching. And he was telling his students at a place called London College of Music, which is actually in Ealing. I think it's in, Ealing, very near where Gary lives. And they were pretty good kids. They weren't like the super hot academy or the Trinity courses, but they were a very good course. And I taught there a bit. And I taught at Brunel. I had a lot of the same kind of students, he used to tell the students, like from the time he started teaching there, he said, it's good to learn to be a good accompanist because there's a lot of money in it.
Yes. Yes.
And that's where you get the call to work when there's a need for a dep or a situation. Yeah. And they don't want to know how great a solo. It is unfortunate because, there's so many great soloists who play guitar and piano and bass and drums. But it's just not necessary for that kind of work. That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah. Also, I'm of the belief, I remember Zarinor was once speaking about soloing. I believe there needs to be a real deep study amongst us jazz people about what our music actually does and its function. It has become the domain of the artiste. But it's dance music. It's a dance music. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we've allowed the pop world to dominate that area and make millions and millions and millions. And we've become arty. Nobody wants, my daughter, who's grown up amongst this, she wants to listen to Beyonce. She wants to listen to Rihanna because she wants to emulate them. Why? Well, they're going to make some money, or they're current. People see them. And we in the jazz world, as much as, we love this community we built, we've got to start teaching the youngsters from the start again. You can have a drummer who doesn't solo. In reality, which musician, non-bass player, do you know studies bass solos? Nobody. I've never heard of a saxophone player saying, I'm going to study Scott LaFaro solos.
I've got a Paul Chambers solo written out, and I just love playing.
Oh, thank you. Because there are some great Paul Chambers solos.
Well, I mean, he never had any pretense about solos. He just played really strong melodies. And he reminds me of Oscar Pettiford, actually.
Yeah, he understands.
That style.
Yeah, he understands bebop.
So jazz has become, obviously, a bit of a niche within a bit of a niche, but very largely. But, it comes down to cost to an extent, doesn't it? Because when it comes to it, people are not necessarily dancing to live music at all. If you think about the DJs, and the DJs might sometimes play some jazz, but it's recorded and it's DJ. I mean, that's where that's gone in the last, I suppose, 50 years or so. I guess, I don't know. And so, the idea that even a pop band will be playing to again, pop has become an art form, isn't it? Because they play concerts. Not dances, when rock
I wasn't
bands
saying
play.
that we shouldn't be an art form. I wasn't saying that. Of course we are. We're supposed to develop, and if we listen to what Ellington was saying, he wanted the music to develop and go forward. What I'm saying to a lot of the younger players is, because I get classical musicians coming in sometimes, and the first thing is, I can't solo. I said, well, you don't have to solo. Dennis Baptiste is in the corner. He can solo for you. Sometimes we just need people who can hold the rhythm down.
Like that. Yes.
Well, I would like to.
Sorry.
You mentioned the classical classical musicians, and Gary and I have talked over the years about the string team, which is a group of largely classical trained string players that play as part of the
Tomorrow's Warriors, yes.
Part of the jazz and situations there. And I've written, and lots of us have written pieces for jazz string quartets, essentially, but not, as you said, not requiring them or imposing any kind of need for improvisation. Yeah. However, in every quartet that we've formed, and I'm sure the same applies to the younger players at string team. We've always had one or two kind of rogues who come out and risk a solo. I don't mean to sound like it's risky in terms of what comes out, because what melodies you hear are brilliant. We hear some beautiful improvisations.
They've shown the courage, you mean? Yeah, they've got.
Well, like it's kind of a risk, because I taught an improv class for 20 years at Brunel, and half of the class were not improvisers, and they were doing it for the first time, and they were really scared, but most of them did well on their exam. Not that you can examine performance. That's a whole issue in itself, which we'll do on another show.
People have a go at doing that.
They learn the chords and the scales, and they just learn the harmony. I don't even like to use the word scale, because scale is a very kind of a limiting structure in itself. So anyway, Gary, the time has just flown by, hasn't it, Anthony?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming along,
Mr. Duncan. It's an honor to sit down with you. And Anthony, thank you very much.
Well, thanks so much, as I say,
you guys
for being here. So you can find out more about Gary at GaryCrosbyBass.com.
Yeah,
I just want to put that in there so that people can find you.
I'd love to tune in again with you guys.
Oh, please do. Yes.
I'd love to, if anybody has any info on Gunter Schuler, which is my new new hero at the moment.
I know his son quite well, Ed Schuler, who, like you, is a bass player.
I would love to make contact with him.
I'll put you in touch. Yeah, it's my pal. He lived in my building for 10 years.
We'll let them sort that out.
Anyway, I'll put you in touch with Ed, of course I will.
So, George, thank you for being here too. Frank.
Anyway, good night, good people.
Frank on his wonderful clarinet. And we're going to finish now and say goodbye. We'll be back next week, or some of us will anyway. But we're going to finish now with a live performance from about 10 years ago by the Chris Barber Band, playing Duke Ellington's Jubilee Stomp.
I'm going to stay for this.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's true.